There we go. Hello, I'm Nathaniel Smith, and welcome back to Bookcasting. Today's very interesting subject. It's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but never got a chance to talk about. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Disney. Um, Not like modern bullshit, all the bullshit of corporate Disney as of today, but rather the start of the corporate bullshit Disney that I think everyone kind of has glossed over and ignored. We're going to specifically talk about why did the Disney's animation department essentially die? The go-to answer people will try and tell you is, well, they just died because the later films were underwhelming and bad and blah, blah, blah. Is that true for the most part? No. No, not really. There were a few duds here and there, but overall, actually, the vast majority of animated films in the 2000s was damn good films that just were unlucky and also deliberately screwed over by Disney uh, itself. Basically, the downfall of Disney's hand-drawn-animation department came because of the Disney Renaissance. What? Yes, the Disney Renaissance killed the hand-drawn-animation department. Now, I know that sounds weird because you're thinking, but the Disney Renaissance was a huge commercial success. It helped innovate and push animation forward, and it did such a great job for the studio, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, well, the thing is, the Disney Renaissance was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it was a great improvement in terms of the development of animation with the studio and the commercial success of the studio, but that success brought about corporate politics, right? And this corporate politics started to breathe down the throats of the animators with each passing animated film during the Renaissance success, especially once you get to the successes of Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, right? With The Lion King's commercial success, and with the Beauty and the Beast being nominated for Best Picture, it never won, of course, but it was actually nominated for Best Picture. And this is an interesting bit of history most people probably don't know, unless you're an avid Disney fan, but the entire Best Animated Feature, award from the Academy Awards didn't come about till after Beauty and the Beast, which led to the Academy coming up with the concept of doing the Best Animated Feature. So basically, every animated film that won Best Animated Feature can thank Beauty and the Beast for being commercially successful enough, and a good enough film that it was nominated Best Picture led to, that honorary title of Best Animated Picture. I just find that interesting. Anyways, the point is, with all the success, it brought a lot of corporate politics, and more absurd demands started to get pushed onto the animation teams of making each film be as commercially successful as Lion King, or making each film manage to win an Academy Award and all that. And because of the constant push for these ever increasing demands that became more impossible to meet, it pushed animators into a situation they shouldn't have been put into, where they kept trying to think about how they could top themselves. They didn't think about let's just focus on making a good movie. And this escalated until it led to the production hell disaster that was The Emperor of the Sun, or what is best known as The Emperor's New Groove. Now, The Emperor's New Groove had a documentary about the making of it called The Sweatbox, and it pretty much shows the crazy insanity of what happened with Emperor's Son, how it became The Emperor's New Groove, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to get too into that whole situation. There's been already all sorts of videos talking about how, the whole production hell of The Emperor's New Groove and everything and all that jazz. So, yeah. But the interesting thing to point out here is that because of the production hell that this film caused, because corporate kept pushing more and more demands onto the animators, that no matter how good the animators are, they couldn't fully accomplish those demands. Because it's like, let me put this in context you can understand. Imagine you were just a filmmaker, you're making your own movies, they're doing well, and then you had like corporates breathing down your neck going, okay, make each movie be as commercially successful as the last one, make each movie win Academy Award as the last one, make each movie as this and this and this and this. Exactly, by constantly pushing these sorts of demands, it's just going to be harder to focus on just making a good movie, let alone a good, great one. And that's essentially what happened with the Emperor's New Groove, or what was Emperor of the Sun, I should say. Because basically, the guy that essentially did the Lion King, he tried to make a greater and greater and greater film, which he couldn't possibly obtain because he was focusing on making the greatest thing ever because of the constant push and pull and demands of corporate heads that led to the production hell of the Emperor of the Sun, which led to, basically the film was taken away from the Lion King guy, handed to these other guys that made the Emperor's New Groove as it was. And because of this change, they had to postpone the movie 6 months from its original release date. Why is this important? When it was released in December. And in December that year, The Grinch came out. Now, The Grinch 2000 film, or whatever it's called, yeah, it was a terrible movie. But the thing is, the ad campaign for that film was insane. Plus, it was a recognizable IP at Christmas time with a big-ass actor called Jim Carrey. So basically, it was like a moth to a flame. People were going to watch that more than anything else. The Emperor's New Groove wasn't able to be successful, and because of the production hell and the money it took for this production hell, the Emperor of the Sun's failing money-wise, basically corporate wanted to fucking kill the animation department after this movie. And so they went about doing just that. A lot of the later films that the animation studio made, Disney pretty much made sure those films would do absolutely poorly. For example, Treasure Planet is a great example of this. Treasure Planet was given little to no promotion, was released during fucking big-ass blockbusters like Harry Potter and one of the Bond films. So, in other words, there's no chance in hell that film would make any money. And they knew it. And that's why they made sure it didn't sell well, and that's why they made sure they didn't give any promotion for it, and that's why they pretty much buried the film after its release. And Atlantis was pretty much similar. They released that film up against Shrek, and because Shrek had the bigger promotion and was recognizably connected to fairy tale, like in animation, because fairy tales were still recognizable for a lot of animated films even back then at that time. Yes, I know it was a parody spoof, but still, you know what I'm getting with this. And the greatest problem also with Atlantis was that Atlantis Lost Empire was promoted as an adult film, which was so stupid. You're basically alienating your target demographic. It's very obvious that Atlantis Lost Empire was basically more of a film for the boys. Basically the sort of kids that would watch like Star Wars, for example. And the films are very much influenced in that way, basically more akin to something like Indiana Jones, essentially, mixed in with a little tinge of like steampunk and stuff like that. So mispromotion going on with a lot of these films, and terrible release dates, or even little to no promotion at all. And the greatest irony is Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch came out, I think, 2003. So it was only a couple years before they dumped their hand animation studio. Lilo and Stitch was a fucking commercial success. You know why? It had a solid release date, and it had solid promotion. It was so successful, Lilo and Stitch had a fucking ride. Lilo and Stitch also had a fucking TV show. You even got an anime, apparently, at some point. My point is, Lilo and Stitch proved that the hand animation studio could still sustain itself and continue within the next decade. But it didn't matter. The studio wanted to shelve it pretty much right away. And they basically wanted another Pixar clone, which is why they went the CGI route. And that's why they essentially dumped the hand animation department. So yeah, that was actually the reality of the situation for the most part throughout the majority of the early mid-2000s. Yeah, there might have been a few weak films that came out, those anime films, like mainly Home on the Range or something like that, but overall, when it came to Disney's hand animation efforts, they weren't actually as bad as people made them out to be. They're actually way better than they should be, and deserve way more credit than they got. And I'd still say that, and I'm sure most people would say that actually seen the films or grew up with the films or what have you. The problem was that Disney just wanted another Pixar clone because Pixar had more commercial success. Disney's Animation Studio didn't. Lasseter, yes, here comes Lasseter. Lasseter didn't really much care for this very much. And the reason why I bring this up is because Lasseter tried to revive the animation department with the early 10s. Because the Disney's animation studio, once it went all CGI, most of their films were incredibly unsuccessful and underwhelming. Basically, they kind of handed things over to Lasseter, kind of, sort of, so he could fix things up for the Disney's animation studio again. And Lasseter wanted to make sure that he brought hand animation back, and this led to two last animated films, Princess and the Frog and Winnie the Pooh. Now here's the thing. Both these films are pretty damn good. Greatly animated, greatly done stories. There's hardly anything bad about them, or like terribly bad. And frankly, they would have been commercially successful if it wasn't for the fact that Disney corporate made sure that these films would commercially fail. Deliberately. But how can you say that? Both films failed the exact same way, back to back. Do you know why both Princess and the Frog and Winnie the Pooh were unsuccessful in their release? I'll tell you why. They were released up against giant motherfucking megla blockbuster movies. And not just any megla blockbuster films, but two films in particular. Princess and the Frog was released up against fucking Avatar, which we'll get into in a second. And then Winnie the Pooh was released up against Harry Potter. Not just any Harry Potter, the last fucking Harry Potter movie. The last one! Who the fuck was going to watch Winnie the Pooh when the last Harry Potter movie was coming on? Let's be honest here for a second. Right? So in other words, Lasseter did everything right, but he just didn't expect Disney Corporate to deliberately kind of mispromote these films and give terrible release dates to make sure that they would fail miserably, only to give an excuse of, well, hand-drawn-animated films aren't as successful or interesting. If that was the case, why is The Princess and the Frog still somewhat successful? Why are you still making a ride, skin of a ride, for Princess and the Frog if it was that bad, etc., etc.? I mean, granted, a lot of that is really just diversity points, because Black Princess... But to be fair, Princess and the Frog is just a great film regardless of her being, Anyways, the point of the matter is, the reason both those films were failures, commercially speaking, was because they were up against giant blockbusters. Now, you can say all you want that Avatar wasn't a good film or whatever, especially looking back on it, but it didn't matter. Who directed the film? Fucking James Cameron. This is a man who's never lost commercial success on a film, even to this day. Even Avatar 2 was a commercial success. Even when we knew what we were getting into, for God's sakes. It still was commercially successful. Why? Because no one can touch James fucking Cameron. Fuck's sake. Whew, sorry. So basically, even though Avatar was a new film, because it was made by James Cameron, because of the CGI spectacle of the film, it was like a moth to a flame. Everyone was going to see that movie. Everyone was going to talk about that movie. Hardly anything else was going to get attention at that time. So there's no way in hell Princess and the Frog had a shot of getting any recognition in the time in which it was released. And then, of course, like I said, with Winnie the Pooh, it was a release against the last fucking Harry Potter movie. Which, again, not the first time they did this. They did the same thing with Treasure Planet, and the same thing happened. The film didn't do well, commercially speaking, and then it got shelved like everything else. The greatest irony is, because Winnie the Pooh was overshadowed by this fucking Harry Potter movie, most people don't even know that Winnie the Pooh was the last hand-drawn animated film. They think it's Princess and the Frog because Princess and the Frog is the one that everyone knows about. And that's the real reason why the hand-drawn animation department was killed off. Basically, it was corporate politics putting too much unnecessary pressure on the animation studio until it eventually would bust with a production hell of an animated movie that would lead to the studio to go, well, this film isn't making any money, so we're just going to shelve it and find excuses to justify shelving it and just make another Pixar clone. And what's worse is because of all the stupid bullshit of today, with what all the nonsense that Disney's doing today, which is well worth criticizing and all, a lot of people ignore, like, the killing in the hand-drawn animation department was the beginning of all this. This is where it all started here. And mind you, the wanting to kill the hand-drawn animation department is not new. Disney corporate wanted to kill the hand-drawn animation department since Walt Disney died. Okay? No, I'm serious. I am dead serious. If it was not for the commercial success of The Jungle Book, we would have not had no other animated films. No other hand-drawn animated films from Disney Studio. Or any animated films to boot. That means there would be no Disney Renaissance. No Lion King. No Aladdin. No, no Little Mermaid, etc. None of those films would exist if The Jungle Book failed commercially. So God knows how many great hand-drawn animated films we would have had they not deliberately dumped the studio when they did, giving a bullshit excuse which was a lie, and we all know that now. And more people are coming to their senses, realizing that basically corporate just wanted another Pixar clone, and they wanted an excuse for that, and so, etc. So yeah, that's why the Renaissance, in the end, both revived and killed Disney's animation studio, because its commercial success put all this unnecessary pressure on the studio, on the animators, thanks to the fucking corporate heads constantly being busybody little shits, demanding more and more unnecessary expectations that would eventually lead to some production hell nightmare that was, The Emperor of the Sun. And because The Emperor's Sun, when it was revived in Emperor's New Groove, didn't have the commercial success because of unfortunately having to be postponed 6 months and released at the worst time, they had to go, right, let's just kill the studio now. And they just made sure each film didn't do well with piss poor promotion, piss poor release dates to justify getting rid of it. And it's so tragic because, like, if you look at the majority of the films that came out, hand-drawn animated films that they made, they're amazing. Treasure Planet is the best steampunk movie ever made. Last Lost Empire is like one of the greatest action-adventure animated films, theatrical animated action-adventure films ever made to this day. Lilo and Stitch is still fucking fantastic as it's always been. Emperor's New Groove, one of the greatest animated comedies ever fucking made. These are bona fide Disney classics, and basically anyone who grew up or discovered these films have realized this up to this point. And here's the irony I want to point out. Okay, this is the final point I want to make. There was a lot of hand-drawn animated films from Disney that didn't do well commercially speaking, that became recognized as Disney classics after the fact. Bambi, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Alice in Wonderland. These films did not do well commercially when they originally released. They only became more successful thanks to re-releases, and because of the re-releases, they got more recognition, and especially with the rise in DVD, VHS sales, it helped promote these films, and it made people recognize how good these films actually fucking were. And that's, I think, the greatest sin, is that if films like Treasure Planet, or Last Lost Empire, or The Emperor's New Groove, or Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Mulan, the original anime films, etc., had gotten re-releases, have gotten re-released in theaters today, etc., they would have gotten way more attention now, and they would be recognized as the classics that they already are, instead of being kind of the underrated films that are considered bad because they had poor release dates, commercially speaking. It's ridiculous. Anyways, I rambled on enough. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, that's all I gotta say for tonight. So, see you later.